All right, today we're going to try and piece together a portrait of one of history's most influential figures, Prophet Muhammad. But we're going to do it through the eyes of the people who actually knew him, and we're going to start with a really fascinating puzzle.
So check this out. There was one of his companions, a man named Amr ibn al-As, who said that there was nothing in the world he loved more than just to look at the Prophet's face. And yet, when people asked him to describe what he looked like, he'd say, I can't. I couldn't describe him.
So what's going on there? How can you love looking at someone so much but not be able to describe them? Well, that question, it gets right to the very heart of all the accounts that were left behind. And it wasn't because he was plain or forgettable. It was something much, much deeper. The thing is, according to the sources, people were just filled with this overwhelming sense of awe when they were around him. His senior companions, the ones closest to him, said they felt such a deep reverence that they actually found it hard to look him straight in the eye. They were kind of caught between this intense desire to see him and this powerful feeling that they shouldn't. And you know what? This actually solves a little historical puzzle. You'd think the clearest, most detailed physical descriptions would come from the senior leaders, right? But they don't. The best ones actually come from the younger companions, kids who grew up around him, serving him, and just watching him with that unfiltered child's eye view. And when these companions did try to describe him, you can almost hear them struggling, reaching for the most brilliant, beautiful things they could think of, the sun and the moon. One person said that when he walked in, it was like the sun had just risen. Another said that when he was happy, his face would literally light up like a full moon. So you see, these weren't just descriptions, they were trying to capture an experience. Okay, so beyond these beautiful poetic comparisons, what did they say he actually looked like? Let's try to piece together the portrait from the physical details they did manage to record. So let's start with Anas ibn Malik. Now, this is a man who served the Prophet for 10 years, starting when he was just a young boy. So he had this very up-close, very personal view. He describes a man of medium height with hair that was somewhere between curly and straight and hands that were softer than any silk he ever touched. And he said his natural scent was more fragrant than the best perfumes. Then you have his cousin and son-in-law, Ali, who adds even more detail to this portrait. He describes a strong, broad-shouldered man with a face that was slightly oval and these large, dark eyes with really long lashes. You put it all together, and you start to get this picture of a man who was very physically striking. And there was also this one really unique physical marker, something known as the seal of prophethood. It was this small outgrowth of hair between his shoulder blades, and it was said to have been foretold in earlier scriptures. It was actually a sign that some people, like Salman al-Farsi, used to recognize him as a true prophet. But you know, the physical descriptions, that's really only half the story. Because his character, his lifestyle, it stood in such stark contrast to the incredibly powerful leader he became. I mean, think about it. At the height of his influence, when he's the undisputed leader of Arabia and money and resources are pouring into the city, his personal life didn't change one bit. He lived a life of just profound simplicity. There's this one really famous story that just perfectly captures this. A companion named Omar comes to visit and finds the Prophet sleeping, not on a bed, but on this rough mat made of palm fiber. And the pattern of the mat was literally pressed into his skin. And when Omar saw that, he just started to cry. And the details of his daily life just reinforce this picture. His bed was usually just a leather skin stuffed with leaves. He actually got upset with his wife once for making it too comfortable because he was worried it would make him oversleep and miss his prayers. And his family would often go for weeks subsisting on just dates and water, even when there was more available. And this humility, it just carried over into all of his interactions. What emerges is a picture of a man with incredible gentleness and courage, who also, by the way, had a really well-documented sense of humor. Just stop and think about this for a second. Honest, the man who served him for a whole decade, said he was never once told off. He never even heard a word of irritation from him, not even the slightest sound of annoyance like, "Ugh." 10 years. But his character wasn't just in what he didn't do. It was in his actions. One time, a man saw him with a new cloak and just asked for it. Without a second thought, the Prophet went inside, took it off, and gave it to him. Another time, a loud noise terrified the city at night. He was the first one out the door, jumping on a horse bareback and riding alone towards the danger, just to come back and tell everyone that they were safe. And he even had this playful side. When an elderly woman asked him to pray for her to get into paradise, he kind of teased her and said, "Old ladies can't enter paradise." Well, she started to get really upset. And then he smiled and explained the good news. She wouldn't enter as an old lady. God would make her young and beautiful again first. So even his jokes were kind and always truthful. So you have all these different traits, right? The humility, the gentleness, the bravery, and they all culminated in what is maybe the most defining part of his character, this profound love, an incredible sense of responsibility he had for his community. Now, to really get this, you have to understand this one tradition. The belief is that God grants every single prophet one special request. Just one prayer that is absolutely 100% guaranteed to be answered. Now, a lot of the prophets, the accounts say, use this incredibly powerful prayer during their lifetime. Some asked for a kingdom, some for protection, some even used it in frustration against the people who rejected them. But Muhammad, he made a very different choice. He said that he was saving his one guaranteed prayer. He wasn't going to use it for wealth or power or victory in this world. No, he saved it as a final act of intercession for his entire community on the Day of Judgment. And that single act is presented as the ultimate expression of his character. It just ties everything we've talked about, the humility, the kindness, the leadership. It wraps it all up into this one final selfless act of love, putting the fate of his followers above any possible gain for himself. And that love was the key. When a man once confessed that he didn't really have a lot of good deeds to his name, but that he loved the prophet, he was told, "A man shall be with the one whom he loves." Anna said that when the companions heard that, they had never been happier, realizing that their love was what connected them to him. And so we come full circle, right back to the beginning. The man who was so difficult to describe, it wasn't just about a collection of physical features. According to his companions, that indescribable awe he inspired was a direct reflection of the profound, selfless love he showed them. The portrait they painted wasn't just of how he looked, it was a portrait of who he was,